Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I'm Andrew Scaff. He's Mike Werman. Today we'll get to the Women's World Cup. More shakeup in the world of the NCAA, especially in the football conferences and basketball too, I guess. And some NFL offseason news. But we'll start today, as we tend to this time of year, with the Kansas City Royals and their up and down, mostly down season, but recently up. Their season continues. The Royals just capped their 7-game win streak with a quick 3-game losing streak, but they won tonight. So, Mike, are you still riding the high of the 7-game win streak, or did the 3-game losing streak that followed immediately plunge you back into the disaster of this season has been so far?
Well, it almost did. I think if they had lost 4, it would have. But we had talked about the last couple of days. Some of those losses, at least 2 of those losses were pretty iffy. I think the one where the last loss to Boston, the 6-2 walk-off grand slam loss, where there really had been a blown call by the first base umpire on an appeal. There was a strikeout, and the guy pretty clearly went around. I guess it was not like, it wasn't a full swing, but it was like more than what is usually needed to call to say it's a failed check swing and would be a completed swing. So and it seems like everybody, even the guys on the Red Sox, knew that or thought that this was out number 3, going into extra innings. Who knows? Again, the Royals could have lost an extra innings, but
Sure.
it at least would have been more, I guess, deserved if it had been the lost then. And Quatrero looks like he got thrown out 2 of those 3 games because of those iffy calls. And Amy Iffy is being generous on
blatantly bad umpiring.
Yeah, especially since we have so much data now, and it seems like things should be able to be overturned that are clearly erroneous, but aren't.
What would you rather see in baseball? Fully robo-called games, balls and strikes, or at least the ability to challenge individual pitches, or what would be your preferred way to make the game actually follow the rules that they have established?
I would say that there should be a central authority that could overrule clear errors. And so there would be, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be a team that challenges. There should just be somebody in New York watching the games, and you can see, well, this pitch was really outside the strike zone and it was called a strike, or this one was right down the middle and called a ball, and it should have not, and then they should be able to correct it. And it shouldn't.
But that'd have to happen instantly, though. So you may as well.
I think it could. If you just have to have somebody watching the game, and they could say, "Well, look at the box. That's the strike zone, and this is way out." It's like, no, it's a strike.
Yeah. So I think the current proposal for using the robo-called games, anyway, robo-umps, is just to have an earpiece in the home plate umpire's ear that just tells them directly if it's in or outside the zone. And and maybe they could overrule it, I guess, if it's close and they thought it was.
I would say let the umpire do it unless it's a clear error, and then overrule. So you could kind of, at least in some ways, see what the human is doing and kind of be able to show how much better it would be with correct. Because I think it's sort of like what courts do. They will let they usually really only they will see an appeal if there's, they call it, clear error that affected the outcome. And so
that's not instantaneous, though.
Well, that's a lot. It's reviewing in a long time, but it's a standard. I think all you have to do is, the evidence is there. There's no testimony that you have to hear or constitutional issues you have to deal with. It's basically just Is this a strike? Is this not a strike? Is this
Yeah.
a swing? Is this not a swing? Is
But
this
the umpire had a device that tells them if it is a strike or isn't a strike
well?
instantly. They'd at least have that to go off of rather than just their own eyes, which apparently aren't very good because
Well,
they
I would rather have it be corrected, and have the evidence of a bad call,
see that's what
because
they should be doing behind the scenes, like inning by inning almost, right
yeah,
now. And then if they don't get better at it, then just replace them their
yeah.
ability to make the calls if they can't
Well,
improve.
I like having the public see what's happening, maybe, and have the players and
We do see it though.
mm,
We
but
we see the box on our screen.
yeah,
We
that's
know
true.
exactly before the umpire does if it's a ball or a strike. But the umpire doesn't see that box, so that's where maybe there needs to be a public shaming of umpires
Yeah,
that
this calls.
don't get it right. Like they have to like do something embarrassing between innings, you know, to or they have to like take a shot of hot sauce or something like that if they for every call they missed in the previous inning. What about that? Would you
I,
think that would
I
improve
I don't want to have
calling?
like a double dare type of challenge that people have to go through, even if a slopstickle course might be entertaining, but or just or a fear factor type of
Perfect.
man versus food hot sauce challenge. I think it should just be let like it just sort of let people make the call, and if it's right, let it stand. But if you see that it's wrong, quickly step in and say, no, you were wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think that would show, because like I think that would show people that we're watching, and we see, and we want the right thing to happen.
Yeah.
And but we trust usually the umpires to make their own judgment. And if only if it's obviously erroneous, that we can just see, like, oh, that was a swing, like that check swing was alleged check swing, I guess, was
Yeah.
actually a swing.
Well, the
And
batter put his head down and was like halfway to the dugout by the time
yeah,
he was told that it was called not a swing, and then had to go back, had to like go to first. He looked surprised as anybody else did because he knew it
yeah,
was a swing. That's usually they just look at that. They go by, if the first base umpire had just seen the body language of the hitter, he didn't even have to make a decision. He's like, well, he already told me what he did, right?
yeah,
Because it's supposed to be about intent now anyway, which is stupid. But the old rule was if the bat crosses the plate, it's a strike. And so the umpire only has to look to see if the bat crosses the plate, right?
mhm,
And then that was what was changed to now it's like about intent. Did he mean to swing? Right.
yeah.
So now the umpires are having to judge the intent.
Intent, I think, that's harder to do.
Yes.
I don't think you can tell intent based off of any evidence, because it's in the mind of the person,
Right.
and then you have to say, well, how far did you swing is all you can really do. Whether you
Yeah.
meant, it's like all of the people mean to hold off when they check it. It's not like
Right.
there's anybody that's just saying, well, I missed it, so I'm going to pretend to hold. I don't know if there's that much time to think about it.
Well, so
And
the extreme argument on either side is, well, if he intended to swing, he would have gone all the way around. Or the opposite, extreme of that case is like, well, if he brought a bat with him, he was planning on using it probably. So, right.
yeah, I think the intent to swing is like,
That's why that rule is very dumb, because before it was
yeah,
just like, there is a defined space. If the bat crosses through this plane, then
yeah,
it is a strike. But now it's about intent, and so it's like there are these bizarro ways that it could be interpreted.
I guess
Rule
sometimes you
became
might
much less
say
clear.
there are maybe outlying cases where a person could kind of go around and obviously not mean to, like, just kind of casually, kind of after the ball's in there, kind of moving the bat around.
I think it's more about like if you're about to get hit by a pitch and you're pulling back,
Yeah,
the bat head like flicks forward,
yeah.
right? And
I think
then
that's different though. Yeah, I think that's not. I think.
it's
Yeah,
like
I
the
don't.
intent wasn't necessarily to swing. It was like a self-preservation in the
But
bat
then yeah, but then
forward.
pretty much every check swing is an intent to swing then, because they
Then they
attempt.
should all be called strikes, right? If that's
Yeah,
if everyone is on the same page, that would be, how they interpreted the rule, and all of the umpires should agree as to how they should be like looking to call these things. But it doesn't seem like that. This just seemed like a guy decided he wanted to go home and thought the fastest way for him to go home was to say that was a check swing to load the bases and give Boston, a chance to win the game on the next batter rather than having to go play extras, and maybe this goes on for, a couple more innings or something. That's what it looked like, because that game, shouldn't have ended that way.
I think it was that he didn't see it. He wasn't paying attention, and they were at home in Boston, and he thought, well, if we call it a third strike, I'm going to get booed, so I'm not going to call it. And
that shouldn't matter.
Well, I think that's what does matter for umpires. They don't want to get yelled at by home fans, and so they want to, like, if it's a close call, unless they know it's one way or the other. They like, I guess some umpires might enjoy, like Joe West enjoyed getting yelled at by people. There's some of those kind of masochist or kind of heel types that enjoy that. But I think this umpire was a guy who he did not want to be the cause of the end of a game or the end of an inning that he wasn't really paying attention to, especially if it would have upset home fans. That's my guess. I don't know. That's my guess of what the umpire's intent was when he made the blunder.
It was a well-known official, though, who was behind the plate today for today's game. Vic Carapazza was the umpire at first, and then was behind the plate today for the Royals win tonight.
Did you know that we are older than Vic Carapazza?
I did not know that, but seeing him yesterday, that I wouldn't be surprised.
44. He's 44. He's from Long Island, New York. So maybe he would have thought that calling you against the Red Sox would have been seen as New York bias, or perhaps he was pro East Coast working class because he's got that Italian last name. He's supporting the AL East there. He was.
It does seem like
Blue Jays fans
win more often, get more breaks, and teams that lose, don't.
Apparently, there were some controversial calls that Carapazza made in the American League division series in 2015 between the Royals and the Blue Jays that apparently went the Royals' way, and the Blue Jays were very upset about it the next year. So maybe this is going back. Well, he thinks, well, I've given some calls or have been upset. People yelled at me before for siding with the Royals, so now I'm going to go against them, even though that was 7 years ago now, or 8 years ago now.
And there's only like one member of the team that's still present from it.
Right. Salvi.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find out what those calls were. No, this was a 19-inning game that the Blue Jays lost against the then Cleveland Indians, now Cleveland Guardians, and apparently,
so it wasn't the Royals.
No, but it was apparently bad blood boiling over from that game. I'm seeing, at least on Wikipedia says that. I can't see the article that they linked to. I guess Encarnacion had some issues. There were Blue Jays fans booed Carapazza in response to calls. So maybe let's say Jays fans call foul on game 2 umpire. So the Blue Jays lost to go down 2-0. But commentators, players alike voiced some bewilderment and frustration. Home plate umpire Vic Carapazza's inconsistent strike zone, they say. I don't remember that game that well. Game 2, was that a Cueto?
Possibly, it could have been. If it was, Cueto got shelled in Toronto.
Okay, so it wasn't then, probably.
Yeah, Cueto got rocked in
It wouldn't have been ALDS, it would have been ALCS.
right.
It says ALDS on the thing, but let's
Yeah.
I don't
It
know.
doesn't matter really.
Doesn't really matter. But I don't know. I think it was a bad call, and I don't know. We can go into the intent why it was. But the Royals ended up, I guess salvaging a win today, and they won handily. They've been scoring a lot. They've been scoring some runs. The pitching has been good. Cole Reagans has seemed to be a revelation since they brought him back and since they traded for him. So and Bobby Witt is still doing very well. He didn't have a great game today, but he got another hit. So his batting average is 269 or 270, something like that.
Like 268, yeah. Michael Garcia, I believe, has a 12-game hitting streak right now as the leadoff spot.
Yeah,
so he's been part of the a big part of their current stretch, at least. They won 8 of their last 11 now.
Yeah,
and the bottom part of the lineup scored. I had a lot of hits today. Bolivares had 2 hits. Beatty had 2 hits. Waters had 3. Isbell had 1. But still, everybody in the lineup had at least 1 hit tonight. So everybody was contributing.
If you look at the Royals, according to the simple rating system on Baseball Reference, the number of runs per game, they are better or worse than the average team. The Royals are now only the 3rd worst team in Major League Baseball. The A's are still worst. They have a 32 and 81 record, minus 2.2 runs per game worse than average, according to Baseball References system. Colorado, the worst team in the NL, is minus 1.6. They have they're 44 and 68 compared to the Royals 36 and 78 record, but the Royals are only minus 1.4 runs worse than the average team. So that makes, I don't know. So I don't know how exactly that's calculated, but maybe the Royals,
their run differential is worse than the Royals. It's probably
maybe it's run different. It's just purely run differential is how it's calculated. So yeah, it seems
well, who does it have as the 4th worst team?
The 4th worst team is the Detroit Tigers.
It's by run differential.
Is -1. And then there's a few that are tied as the 5th worst with -0.7, the White Sox, the Pirates, and the Nationals. So I guess it is run differential. Because Baltimore, who has the best record now in the American League, is only listed as the 3rd best team by run simple rating system.
Is Texas and Tampa higher?
Texas and Tampa are higher, yeah.
Yeah. Dodgers, are they higher?
Dodgers are higher. I was thinking 3rd best in the AL. Yeah. The Braves and Texas are Braves and Rangers are tied at the highest. Then Rays, then Dodgers, then Baltimore.
Yeah, it looks like it's mostly following run differential trend then. So yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So the Royals have they been eliminated from? I don't know, they haven't been eliminated.
I think not quite yet, but
they aren't listed on
the day is coming soon.
Yeah.
Oh, they have not put up the elimination stat in the standings yet on ESPN. So
what's the Royals' magic number? Is it?
Yeah, it's most of them. I think they need to win almost all of their games to have a shot.
So they lost 78. So if they win out, they would simply be 86 and 78, and that is borderline playoff probably.
And because of the Central, and they probably would have played a lot of the other Central teams.
Oh, I guess they probably win the Central. They won everything out, but
yeah. So right now the Twins are leading the division 5 games over 500. So
that's that seems like it's the highest over 500 the Central has been all season.
So because the Twins have I guess because the Royals beat Boston today, the Twins have actually moved ahead of Boston. So it's no longer, if you read the standings from the AL East down to the AL Central, they're no longer directly in order anymore.
And isn't
Worst AL East team is now not the best AL Central team.
yeah, and they're ahead of the Yankees too, I think.
Oh, they are a half game up on the Yankees. Yeah, that's right. So the AL Centrals would have been fourth in the AL East.
And I think that's even with the Twins losing today. So they've lost today. So they've actually gone down a game. So they were above both Yankees and Red Sox before that even. So this is, rarefied air for the AL Central.
Maybe less rarefied air in the U.S. national team.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
well, rarefied in the case of rare in a bad way, like there's a lack of oxygen, and maybe they were unable to perform at a good level because of such a thing. I don't know. It's tortured logic here, but it was not a good performance for the U.S. women in this year's World Cup. I would say this wouldn't be seen as a great performance for the men in a World Cup. It was to be seen as kind of average for the men. I think the men are expected to make the second round, but you want them to win a game. Like this is exactly how well the men did against, and they lost to the Netherlands in the round of 16, but I think everybody thought that the Netherlands were a better team than the United States going in. So like, had the US won, it would have been an upset. Here, the US was favored and lost. So in some ways, you could say, well, the USA did better for the men's World Cup than for the women's World Cup.
Well, I mean, they qualified to be in the tournament to begin with, where the US men didn't last time, right?
Yeah, so it was the complete opposite, whereas like the women won and the US didn't even qualify.
Right.
And now like things have switched so much where they did the same level, and it seemed like, I don't know, it was just they couldn't score. Like we had mentioned that last week. They just, if you can't score goals, maybe it was sort of a hard luck penalty shootout loss. But
yeah.
And they look better, I guess, supposedly they looked better this past game than the previous ones. It's hard to say because they didn't score any goals.
Sweden was a much tougher opponent, at least on paper, than who they'd faced in their own group, at least anyway. Because
the Netherlands is
3 team internationally, right?
Yeah. The Netherlands is pretty good. They made it to the quarterfinals as well. So like, you could say that those two teams are at least on par with one another. Even FIFA World Rankings are always a little bit, you never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the USA, this was one of their best opponents, and historically one of the best women's teams. I think they have won a couple of Sweden has won some women's World Cups in the past. They had beaten the United States, I believe, in some of the tournaments. No, it was Norway. Sorry, it was Norway that won before. I was thinking it was Sweden.
Do you see this as being because of how the loss happened, right? It was in penalty kicks. Does that make it less devastating, or does it mean anything at all? Do you care? I
think it means something because
it was really tough anyway, because it was like in the middle of the night because the difference is such that Americans weren't watching. Probably most I'm sure were not watching. So most people woke up to the news that they had lost in PKs. Is that?
Well, one of the biggest misses was by Megan Rapinoe, who is for better or for worse, the most famous of the American players, and she is really on the downslope of her career. Probably, had her name not been Megan Rapinoe, would not have made the roster, and somebody else would have made it. It seemed like that was the case for a lot of the older stars. They were holding on, and they were not as good as some of the younger players. And but I think really probably the biggest reason was Rose Lavelle was hurt, or not hurt. She was kind of injured going into the World Cup, but she was on the yellow card suspension. And I think she's usually their best player. And they had to change the lineup around with her absence, and they just couldn't score. And they don't have a good front line that can create its own goals usually, I think, or pass well enough to get the other forward involved. It's like Alex Morgan, all she does is kind of run at the goal and shoot, and there's very little, I don't know, back and forth creativity there. And I think the other forwards were kind of like that. And if you have just somebody who can just kind of kick them the ball and then they run ahead and can shoot and score, but if they're off, like they were in the World Cup, they couldn't score. Like there's no real backup plan, and there wasn't somebody from midfield that could pick up the slack. Like Carly Lloyd could score from midfield all the time, and that's how they're, or Megan Rapinoe could score from midfield a lot, or Rose Lavelle could score from midfield a lot like last time. So like they didn't have somebody from midfield who could score a bunch of goals if the forwards who have been lackluster the last couple of World Cups, at least since Abby Wambach retired. They can't, I don't know. So that's my 2 cents anyway. They didn't score enough goals, and if you don't score any goals, you deserve whatever happens, and they didn't.
Well, then you get into that like kind of technicality of just what happens in a PK situation determines the winner of the game. And if players had put the ball on frame, even they could have advanced, right? Just one of 2 kicks could have gone in that were blown over the crossbar, right?
And one hit the post. Like all 3 of
that was the additional kick right after the first 5, I guess, for each side. Yeah, that next one went off the post, I think, right? Was that what it was?
Yeah, all of the U.S. misses were not. None of the U.S. misses were saved by the goal opposing. Where I think at least a couple of the Sweden misses were saved by the keeper. So it was basically just lack of composure, lack of focus, lack of precision. I don't know what you would say, but just get it. You have to be able to.
You gotta put it on frame. You have to put it on frame. As a non-soccer fan, that is what drives me crazy about it anyway. It's like the goals are huge. Like, how can you not put it on?
Well, it's one of those things where getting it high and in one of the corners is an automatic goal. But if you miss that, you can get it either A, too high, or B, too wide. And that's what happened to all 3 of them.
Those are guaranteed not goals.
Yeah. So it's like it's like like you'll see a lot of really good penalty takers just kick it low and on the ground.
Yeah.
One of the sides. And usually that's going to go in. If it isn't, it's saved, and it has to be a really good save. And you're not going to miss it on your own. You're going to have to at least force the opponent to miss. So keep it low, go wide, but try not to go too wide, and hope for the best. And that's unless you're like really crafty and just wait for the goalie to move and just kick it down the middle.
Right.
But
yeah. So do you find that less disappointing of a loss because it was in like the technicality side of the PKs, or is it does not matter? It's still a loss is a loss. They're out, and
I think it's more disappointing because they didn't score any goals. Like if it had been like a 3-3 shootout, and then they lost like a 3-3, like scoring, like there was good play, good goals, and then they happened to lose kind of in a heartbreaking shootout. That would have been a disappointing loss, but you would have at least felt better about it for the team. Here they didn't score any goals. Like don't deserve to go on. If they go on, well, England had the same thing. They got kind of lucky and they went up. Like it's one of those things. Like you have to score, and if you don't, whatever. You're whatever happens is deserved, I think. And then especially the way the U.S. played in the penalty kicks, the way they kicked, again, they blew it more than the other team won it. So what is more devastating then? Early exit from the Women's World Cup, or the Pac-12 dissolving in front of our eyes? I think it's got to be the Pac-12 because I think the USA they won 2 in a row, and they had actually had a tough run at the World Cup for a while. They'd been winning the Olympics, but had been losing in the World Cup, it seemed like, kind of crushingly for a few iterations. at least since the famous you know China defeat in like 99 or whatever it was, when
Yeah.
Brady Chastain and Mia Hamm and Julie Foudy and all those people were on the team. So, World Cup, it's a single elimination tournament. You're not going to.
Yeah.
It's luck of the. It's just kind of luck, because if you don't score goals, especially, like,
Yeah.
whatever.
But as a national team, they're going to retool and they will be back with younger players likely next time, and right, they'll be
Yeah,
competitive again, right? That's
yeah.
like
I think it'll be
you're not
better.
worried about them like completely dissolving like the Pac-12 has like
No,
completely
no, I think it'll
dissolved.
be better, because I think in a lot of ways the women's team has become more weighed down by political issues and has become sort of a lightning rod of criticism, some deserved but mostly undeserved, I think, in terms of, like, it's become a sort of, it's been seen as kind of a woke anti-Trump kind of group, more maybe than it has been seen as a soccer playing team. And I think
Mm.
maybe just losing some of that will lead to maybe better play, just because we're not holding on to these old veterans that aren't as good of players anymore, but are the big
Yeah.
names. So I
Uh,
don't.
I think what they were doing was totally right though. Like,
I think so too, but I think
demanding more pay for. I mean, they're being shown, their likenesses are being used for like all of the advertising for everything for like months, and then but they're still like getting paid much less than what
I
they're
think politically, I
were.
think what they did
They
was,
should be getting paid a lot.
I
I don't
think
even
that
know
I think that's
why this is
true.
even a question.
I think it's true, but I think it was a distraction from a lot of the actual gameplay,
Yeah.
and
I
and
mean,
so
I don't know. I hope that the cause remains there. They continue to fight for better pay for like the women's sports in general, especially if
yeah,
they're being televised as much or as the expectation is as high as or higher than the men's teams. So I mean, maybe the active players don't have to be so vocal about it if like the players that were very vocal about it continue to do so, as after they're no longer on the roster anymore, though maybe they can still
perhaps
fight
I
for it,
think.
but maybe it was just less well received by certain people because they're active players, but also the people that aren't receptive to that concept are mostly jerks anyway, and we don't really care what their opinions are, do we?
Well, in some ways, I guess you do, if you're simply a amoral corporation that wants money. You want all of those people to watch your games, buy your stuff, and you think, well, if there is this is one of the reasons, like, why Michael Jordan was so, like, apolitical, was the fact, he famously said Republicans buy sneakers too, and so,
Yeah.
like, that was one reason why he was so popular. And so, like, in if it's really about making money and success, having less outside stuff bother you or influence you or be part of it is, I think, better. But, like, you could say, well, maybe society is better off because women are being paid more and things like that. But if your goal is to have a winning soccer team, maybe that stuff is not helpful. That's and so maybe that's what, again, you could say, well, maybe that stuff has been achieved now more. And if it, like you said, if it doesn't roll back, or if the former players are still active in promoting equality, they could let the players on the team shoulder less of that burden and maybe focus more on soccer, and maybe be viewed even
Well, I
more.
mean, those teams that were the most vocal about it actually did win. I mean, they backed it up on the field too, though, and that wasn't really, an issue, was it?
I don't know. I think this was.
They won. I think they won like everything
Yeah, they did. But I
when they
think
were
more.
making the most noise, which is
I think most of the noise has been maybe between the last win and this win,
ah
and they didn't win this time, and they won before. So I think it's been since the last World Cup, I would say. Probably, I don't know if that's true or not, but, like, that's been when, like, it's been since George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, and that kind of and it's in that sort of the cause kind of thing has become more mainstream and more in focus. I think they've been seen more as a political unit maybe than a team, and I guess it could be just coincidental too because the players were getting older and the world is catching up. But I think that would maybe be seen as a connection. I don't really think it affected them, but I think that some of the big names stayed on as players too long, and part
Yeah.
of it is because they became big names because of their social activism.
I mean,
More,
mostly their play. I mean, Rapinoe like dominated
well, she was good for a long time, but
two
she hasn't.
different World Cups,
Yeah.
right?
Well, she hasn't been. She was. Yeah, she hasn't been. Last, 4 years ago, she was kind of on the downslope already, and now she certainly is.
Yeah.
I don't think.
I mean, if the Team USA was concerned about her play, they didn't have to put her on the roster.
No, I know. I guess you could say coaching was a
That's not
problem.
her fault then, right? That's
Well,
a coaching and the organization maybe failed.
yeah, you could say what do they want her on the team because she's such a known commodity, such a important personality, and so it's. I think this is something that men's World Cup teams deal with a lot already,
Yeah.
especially from really strong established countries. Like, do we let the old stars hang on too long, or do we let the
Mm.
new people come in? And like this is what Italy has dealt with, or like what you know Argentina, these countries that should Messi be gone at this point, or should
Germany
uh
and France, I think both did a lot,
yeah,
a lot with that, with the aging men's athletes, at least anyway, right?
yeah, I think especially Germany in maybe the most recent World Cup, but they didn't make it out of the group, I don't think. And
'Cause I think in the most recent World Cup on the men's side, I think didn't didn't France like leave most of their aging stars off the roster until they got really young in the most recent World Cup for them.
France, they made it to the final, but I think France, well,
I thought they had gotten a lot
that's
younger,
possibly. Mbappe was still their best player, both.
but he's not old though.
No,
So
he was young. He was young 4 years
yeah,
ago. He was young this time. Um, Yeah, I think there was some controversy about Portugal with because I think Portugal had its best games in the group stage without Cristiano Ronaldo.
Mhm.
That like when he was around 16, they won like 6-0 and 6-1 or something like that, and some like Ronaldo's backup basically
Right.
had like a hat trick, and then the next game they put Ronaldo in and like they didn't win, or they lost to Morocco in the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
And Spain had that issue too. I think it's one of those. I think so. This is in some ways this is a good problem to have because it really shows that the United States is a power.
Yeah.
And so like this is a bad result, but really every good country, even Brazil, even in men's or Germany or things like that don't always um advance. So it's
Yeah.
Spain.
But again, they will retool. The U.S. women's team will retool, and I'm sure they will be competitive next time.
Yeah, I think they should go younger. I think they went too old this tournament,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's just because they had the names or they thought experience was better, but I don't know. I've never really been an Alex Morgan fan. I don't think she's that good, but she was scored some goals, but like it seems like she scores a lot of goals in like meaningless games against
I
bad.
mean, most of even what you're saying though, it seems like more of the problem is with the strategy and how players are being used rather than the players themselves. I mean, the players themselves are who they are, and how they're used maybe the coaching staff may have gotten more out of the team that they changed up the lineup to maybe utilize the aging players a little better, like late or early, depending on how they wanted to work it. But it didn't work out. Whatever they didn't work out, right?
Yeah. Vlatko Andonovski was their coach the last few years, and it seems like he didn't do very well in the Olympics and then his team hasn't been very good since. And I don't know.
I mean, ideally, players would just step up and make up for coaching decisions. But if they're not scoring goals, then it seems like your personnel has to change up somewhat too, right?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's personnel. I think it's strategy. I think it's partly. I think it's Rose Lavelle was out, and she's their best player, and she's the one who kind of distributes. And I think also the forwards, the way the US they aren't able to adjust if things are not going particularly well. They don't have a lot of tools in their arsenal. They're kind of one-dimensional, I think. And when it works well, it works really well. But when it doesn't, it's a real slog. And I guess you could say that for it's a problem that most players, unless you're like one of the real greats, it's going to be a problem. But I don't know. I guess you could say, well, who does US have that's like a young, creative goal scorer? I don't know the women's game well enough to determine that. The men's team hasn't found a young, creative goal scorer in 100 years, so it's unless
right. But they're back in the World Cup.
Yeah,
they've qualified for the next one, right?
Yeah,
so they'll be back. The women's team will be back too, but we know the Pac-12 will not be back though. Mm-hmm. That's what we know, right?
Yeah, like
now the Pac-4.
Pac-4, yeah. We have Cal, Berkeley, Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State are the only Pacific Athletic Conference teams left. Washington and Oregon went to the Big 10 following USC and UCLA last year. Well, at least they announced it last year. They're going to go. But it seems like Washington and Oregon went as like discount rated Big 10 teams. Did you see that? They are not going to get the same payout as other Big 10 teams.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were offered like this kind of second class deal.
Really?
That still might have been about what they would have gotten from the Pac-10, but because the Pac-10 was going away, because the Big 12 took Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado, Washington and Oregon decided, well, we'll do the discounted Big 10 payout rather than the full whatever Pac-6 plus Fresno State, UNLV, San Diego State would make. And I'm gonna look up Oregon and Oregon and Washington will receive $62 million. No, wait, they if they received the average Big 10 payout, it said, is going to be $70 million per school, but Oregon and Washington got about half of that.
Oh,
so
really?
They got the 2-for-1 discount.
They can share it.
Unfortunately.
Wow.
Yeah.
So which two? So it's Cal and Stanford are still in the Pac-4.
Mm-hmm.
And who are the other two?
Washington State, Oregon State. So
okay. Oh, the two states. Okay.
The two states. And this was kind of what they thought maybe would happen when the Big 12 split up. Maybe KU would go someplace, but K-State would be stuck. It was like Oklahoma went to the SEC, Oklahoma State got stuck, so the state seems to go a little behind the U. But yeah, it was, I don't know. I've heard possibly the Big 12 now is 16 teams. Do they possibly try to poach any of those remaining Pac teams? Do those teams just go to the Mountain West or something like that and take a step down? I've heard.
I think you mentioned to me, at least anyway, before we aired, that a couple of them may be looking at the ACC. Is that right?
The ACC allows these Pacific Coast teams. They think Berkeley and Stanford might be looking at the ACC, which has some strong academic institutions. Yeah. But the ACC is also in some chaos, in some potential chaos, because they're one of their best, biggest draws in terms of national audience. Florida State is looking to leave the ACC and maybe join the SEC or some other conference. I've heard even the Big 10. So it's
Because their beef is basically that they don't like equal revenue sharing. Wasn't that what did you hear about that?
Yeah,
Is that your understanding of it too?
yeah, I think it's because Florida State and Clemson is part of this, but like they're the only two really good football teams. And in the ACC is primarily a basketball conference,
Yeah.
and football is the real moneymaker. And none of those other teams are consistent enough in football. Because you have Notre Dame as kind of a half ACC
Yeah.
school, and it seems strange that they are. I don't know. It seems strange that Notre Dame's not in the Big Ten. Why don't they just
They're sort of unaffiliated, but they're not for football.
yeah, and um it's yeah, I think uh Florida State and Clemson is, I think Florida State has been the most vocal, but Clemson's going to go along with it. Um so I think the payouts right now are I'm looking at for a Forbes magazine report. So the payout for the Pac-12 is going to be $20 million per school with their TV deal. 40 million was the ACC. Where is the ACC about right now? 50 million is Big 12. So they've gone up. So there's, and the SEC is about 55 million. So they're really on par with one another.
Yeah.
And 80 now, and Forbes tells 80 million to 100 million for the Big 10 average for the TV deal,
Wow.
which seems kind of insane that it's so much higher. But I guess it just depends on when you sign your deal. But I guess this is live sports is the only thing that people watch anymore on cable or network television, or at least needs to be watched at the same time as everybody else.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't. I've heard rumors of the ACC either trying to reach out to Stanford and Berkeley, which seems like kind of really like if you were like all of your like like for football maybe it's not that big of a deal because you only travel 5 times a year. But if you're a basketball team and your conference is in the Eastern time zone and you supposedly have student athletes playing, like they're going to
Right.
so much class just going to, well, we got to go to South Carolina, we got to go to Boston to play, and it's just insane. Like I think there has to be some
Yeah.
geographic, like the big, like you could maybe have divisions that are kind of separate, which it seems to me maybe kind of what the Big Ten is trying to do. Like now
West
there are,
Coast, East Coast, and then
at
you
least
stay
now there
within
are,
your coast at least for like local travel
like
ish.
you could have a pod of some sort, like
Yeah.
sort of. I was thinking like maybe since the Big Ten is 18 teams now, maybe they could do 3-6 groups, but it's hard to do that with the Pacific way that far.
Yeah.
The Big 12 would be a little easier to divide because their Western schools don't go quite as far west,
Yeah.
but their Eastern schools go
Yeah.
pretty far.
Well, what would you have? What? The Utah schools, the Arizona schools, and what? The Texas schools?
Colorado. So you have
In
5.
Colorado?
Yeah, so you have those 5. And then you could say, well, maybe we'll just put KU, K-State, Iowa State with those 5. And
Yeah.
then have kind of a diagonal sort of a thing. And then so like have the
Yeah.
Texas schools, Florida, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Central Florida, West Virginia, Cincinnati, and the Texas schools all together or something like that. Or I think that might be the way to do it. And Oklahoma State would be with the Texas
Yeah.
schools. That would be 8 and 8.
Yeah.
Since that would be 5. So yeah, I think that's the best. That's the way I would do it. I don't know if that's the way they will do it or not. Or
Maybe
you could
maybe they'll do 3 6s then or something.
yeah, or you could add more teams. Like we had said, the SEC is 3 6s is 18, and I think having 3 6s rather than 2 9s, you can't really play everybody in football.
Well, football you could play 8.
8, I guess you could play, but then you wouldn't be able to play anybody in the other division ever.
Yeah.
It would be like you want to have some. I think
Yeah.
like otherwise it would be you wouldn't have it would be 2 separate conferences that kind of meet after a while.
Yeah. But I mean that is a strategy. You could do that.
Yeah, I think you want though. I think teams want to have some variety in who they play their opponents. I think unless you can play everybody, you want to be able to everybody in the same season. You want to be able to play everybody at least sometimes.
Yeah.
I think
So
the SEC,
if you did 3 6s, you'd play your 5 division teams every year, and then what?
You could play maybe
three
two,
of each or 2 of each of the other divisions.
2 of each or 1 of each, and 2 depending how many like you had 9 conference games. You could play 2 in each of the other conference of the other pods.
If
and
you
then
do 11 conference games though, so you'd have 3 and 3. You'd play half of each of the divisions plus 5.
no, I was thinking you just play 2 games in each of the other. So there'd be 6 in each conference. So you'd play each of those teams every 3 years.
Yeah.
Then you have 9. You have 9 conference games. There's most conferences have. The SEC doesn't. I think it only has 8 usually.
Because how many games do they normally play in a season? Is it 12, 11?
12 now. Yeah,
12.
12. So they have 3 non-conference, 3 9-conference.
So, I mean, but if you went to 11 games and then you only play 1 non-conference game, say whatever your rival is, outside of your conference, that'd still be 12, but you'd still get to play, more conference games. But I don't know, maybe that's too many competitive games, because they want to schedule some cupcake in there initially, right?
Alabama always schedules some really bad teams. And so does some of the other SEC schools.
Yeah.
Often it seems like they play worse teams because they often will play those teams late in the season. Like there's like a November game, Alabama against Samford or somebody. Like all of the other like teams play their cupcakes in September.
Right. Maybe the first game or second game of the season at worst.
Yeah, that's when Oklahoma will,
roll somebody.
We'll play Northern Iowa or whatever, but now it's the SEC. The SEC has played a lot of their bad teams late, but the 3 6s would also necessitate a semifinals and a final for the conference championship, because if you have 3, you'd have 3 champions, and so you'd have to play at least. You'd have to play.
Right.
You can just play 1 game to decide, or you couldn't just say, well, one of the divisions isn't going to have a.
Right. So you'd have to have a wild card then from somebody else.
Yes. I think that's pretty good actually, because you'd have, let's say if you got stuck in the worst one, you could be the second best team in the, the SEC West for a while was like at LSU and Alabama, who were the 2 best teams in the country for a while. And Arkansas was pretty good too for a while. It was tough to win the SEC West, and if you won the SEC West, you could win the whole thing. Because Georgia was down, Florida was down, Tennessee was down, but now, and Auburn was really good in the West. So like they had a lot of good teams. In some ways, I think having that 18 3 6s and then a wild card, but that would add more games. But I think everybody would want more games, so I think that would be
I mean, unless you wanted to go to an extra regular season game too, which I don't know that they probably would push for that too if you went to a 13th regular season game. I don't know.
It's
we're not going to be able to figure this out. I don't think
it becomes so strange in some ways.
Too many options. Just too
a lot
many
of the schools that probably shouldn't be kept out of a potential power conference are only kept out because they happen to not be like, not today. No school would want Mississippi and Mississippi State probably in their conference, but they're already in the SEC, or Kentucky or Vanderbilt or something like those schools that are not competitive usually, or like Purdue in the Big 10, like, which is never, Indiana, like these teams that are never that good, but they happen to be kind of grandfathered in to a stable conference, and they're there because of that. And so
Rutgers is a bit of a surprise, right, for them to.
Well, that was a pure media rights play. Rutgers, and they had a couple of decent college teams, football teams for a while, but I don't think their basketball team has ever been very strong. And in the Northeast, state universities are not really looked at that much in terms of, like, they don't follow college sports as much.
Yeah.
Well, college football especially, it's pro sports, or it's like a lot of small colleges that play basketball, like in the Big E, we're traditionally smaller, like more like Georgetown or Seton Hall, like it's like small Catholic colleges, or it's like Ivy League schools that are prestigious but haven't had good football teams since the 40s, and
Right.
that's what, there's no public institution north or east of Rutgers that's in a major conference.
Power conference, right? Yeah.
And Rutgers was a surprise, but yeah, there's no UMass or UConn, or those schools are not in it. So like but college football, it's its own kind of thing, and maybe it's just devouring itself, and who knows what's going to happen with it.
Well, yeah, now it's going to be a lot of super conferences, right? So the Big 12 will be 16
teams at least.
The Big 10 will be
18 teams at least. The SEC 18.
Also 18. What's the ACC now?
ACC is, I think, 14 or 15, depending on what you call Notre Dame.
Okay. 14 plus.
Yeah. And it seems the most ripe for disintegration if the SEC wants to say, well, we'll take Clemson and Florida State, or we'll take, the Big 10 says we want Clemson or Florida State, or maybe Virginia, North Carolina, some of the flagship academic institutions. Or if the Big 12 says maybe we can bring in Duke, because now we have Kansas, Arizona, these blue blood basketball teams in the same conference.
Yeah.
UConn maybe we'll get, and then add, so it's hard. If you want to go basketball, I think there had been some rumors as well that maybe Gonzaga would be a Big 12 edition as a basketball only school. And now Houston is Houston's a real power in basketball
for sure,
and Cincinnati historically has been good in basketball. I don't know what's going to happen. I thought it seemed like the Big 12 was kind of dead in the water 10 years ago,
and it didn't look that way
years ago.
Even a few years ago, yeah.
When Oklahoma and Texas were leaving, the Pac-12 could have taken some of the Texas teams, and they didn't for some reason, and that's what cost them their.
I guess the Pac-12 had some issues with their TV deal that they were trying to get done, and they never finalized it, is what it sounded like, that they were still fighting with the whatever TV deal they were working on.
They were working on
that
Apple
may have been
Plus.
Sort of led.
The Big 12 actually was scheduled to renew its TV deal after the Pac-12, but they jumped ahead in the pecking order, and that's basically what saved the Big 12 and sunk the Pac-12, because there were no like slots available anymore, like on ESPN or Fox for Pac-12 games, because all the games have been taken by the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the SEC or the ACC, and there's nothing left. Maybe a few late night spots, but that's about it.
So really, that's what saved the Big 12 then. Now was that?
Yeah, it was like a kind of a shrewd move by the conference to renegotiate its TV deal more quickly than it needed to.
Wow. Yeah.
Speaking of shrewd moves, the Chiefs might need to make one or two, given the fact that their defensive line especially is looking a little bit shaky,
and not because of injury.
Not because of injury, but because we have a suspension of Charles Omenihu, who had a domestic incident. We might not even call it violence. Maybe there was some, but it was a dispute with his, I guess, partner, and she there were charges filed and dropped, but he is missing 6 games now, the first 6 games of the season. He was kind of the big free agent acquisition to play along the defensive line. I think he was somebody they thought they could play either end or tackle. And probably the ends. But I think apparently the Chiefs knew that this might happen when they signed him. That was maybe why they signed him at such a fairly low salary compared to maybe what his potential was. But Omenihu's going to miss the first 6. And Chris Jones will miss, I don't know, he's missed all of training camps so far.
Um,
Do you think that Jones gets re-signed, or is this another Tyreek Hill situation where the Chiefs are going to have to retool and hope for the best from a position group uh,
yeah,
that's
yeah. The Aminahue suspension. You'd think if the Chiefs had the money to make the deal, it seems like they would be moving more quickly to get Chris Jones locked up, right? Is what you would assume.
yeah.
But if they haven't gotten the deal locked up, then they are either not very close on settling uh on a particular number, at least anyway, or something else is, not there yet. So it's not, I don't think it looks very good for Chris Jones signing.
Yeah, he's had some kind of cryptic tweets and say like, K,
Yeah,
it's nice knowing you, or I love you guys, or something like it's like
right.
he's on his way out. It seems a little bit like the Tyreek Hill situation where it seemed like, well, there's this kind of acrimonious contract negotiation, but it seems like it's got to get done, and then suddenly, boom, Hill is traded, or like the day before, it's like, oh, Chiefs are thinking about trading Hill. Hill is traded. And if we find out that there were two possibilities and the Chiefs took the Dolphins rather than the Jets, it seems like maybe things are headed that way for Jones as well, because it was like, oh, the Chiefs are never going to trade Chris Jones. He's always going to be here. But now it seems like, well, there are rumors now that Chris Jones might be traded. But it doesn't mean that's going to happen. But like,
Yeah.
possibilities to the Bears or the Lions or the Texans or someplace like that. But Jones is he was, I don't know if you know, did you follow the NFL top 100 players list?
Hmm.
The
I
Chiefs
saw I
only
saw
had
somebody posted something about it. Yeah.
the Chiefs only had three top 100 players.
Yeah.
All three of their top 100 players were in the top 10 of the
Yeah.
NFL. Jones was number 10,
Okay.
Travis Kelce was number 5, and Patrick Mahomes was number 1. So the Chiefs were, you might think Humphrey or, Tooney maybe on the offense, maybe Bolton or something, but he maybe could sneak in there. But
Yeah.
maybe Jerry Sneed, I think is a really good player. But yeah, it's I don't know what they would do without Jones.
There's no gonna be, there can't possibly be a direct replacement for him, right? So like they're not gonna find another Chris Jones out there. He's a pretty unique player. So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, but yeah, from the team perspective, I don't know if they really want to lock him up to a long-term deal, because they seem to be very ready to move on from players when they're ready for bigger contracts.
Yeah,
With as much as they have committed to Patrick Mahomes, and they're going to, pay Patrick Mahomes for sure. They're not going to let him go. It's just, there just isn't a lot of room for other big contracts for like long-term deals, at least anyway. I don't know how they sign Chris Jones to a bigger deal, but I don't know. I mean, it seems like they
and he
have.
wants, I
How do
think,
you
30.
can't just let him go? So yeah.
Yeah, I think he wants 30 million, but maybe Jones is not super old. Um he's not yet 30. So he's 29. He just turned 29 in July. So, you think maybe an additional 3 years you could,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't go longer than 3 years, that's not too bad. Maybe you could do 3 years, 90
Like
million.
extension.
He's making 20 million now. Maybe you could bump it up closer to 30.
Well,
And
this year, the 2023 season is 20. I think that's already
yeah,
set, right? So unless
but
they
I think
restructure in the
I think
deal.
they would want to restructure. Like the idea would be, well, restructure and then give more money the next couple of, like, maybe make it a signing bonus this year and make it salary next. Wait, I don't know. Somehow push the
This
yeah,
year's salary into next year's window.
yeah, yeah. When the cap's going to be higher next year, probably, just because that's how it tends to go. And
But the
um,
defense seemed to get better in 2022 by getting younger and faster. But that may have also, been aided by having Chris Jones in the middle, because he does so much work in the middle, right?
yeah, this was one of Jones's best seasons. He had 15 and a half sacks, which tied his career high. Um, 44 tackles, which is also his career high this year. So he also had his first playoff sacks, 2 playoff sacks this year, which he had never had sacks in the playoffs before this year. I don't know if you remember that stat. That was just kind of random stat that he had never had any playoff sacks.
I know Frank Clark didn't have a lot of regular season sacks, but he usually had playoff sacks.
Playoff sacks, yeah. And Clark is no longer available as somebody they could bring in late, like
Right.
he went to the Broncos. You do. Carlos Dunlap is available still, maybe as a replacement for Menahue, but like there's not even any money for like an average or below average salary, because a lot of that money is tied up in Chris Jones right now, and there's only like there's less than $1 million I think the Chiefs have in salary cap room. It's like you can't sign really anybody for that. That's only it's more than the minimum is right now. So you need.
Does you think if they traded Chris Jones, they would only have the cap hit of I think $7 million? Is that what it was?
Yeah, so maybe you have $20 million, $25 million to play with.
Well, 20 was his actual cap hit now, right?
I think it's 30.
Was it 27? Was it 27? 28, something like that. I've got it open over here.
Right now, Chris Jones's spot track is very slow. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
It's kind of a wonky. I'm still waiting on it. Maybe because we're both searching for Chris Jones at the same time.
Probably.
Two people doing it. And okay, here's Chris Jones.
I just had to go back, that's all.
His cap hit is 28 million.
28.3.
Yeah, it was 29 million last year. So
yeah. So it would go down to 21. No, you take 21 off, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they could sign someone else, but whatever if they did a trade, whatever they would get in return, if it's a player, would get added.
Well, maybe you could say you could get a couple of defensive, maybe a team that has a lot of or some decent defensive linemen, but not star power that they want. Maybe you could get a couple of players there, like maybe the Bears have a couple of decent guys in the interior, but are not as good as Jones. Or I think I've seen the Bears, the Lions, and the Texans as being the 3 teams that seem like capable of acquiring that much cap space, but also maybe having
something to return,
or at least draft picks. But draft picks aren't going to help the Chiefs this year,
right?
And you would need, I guess there's
good, but this is a win now team, right?
I guess you have Jadeveon Clowney out there somewhere. You have Dunlap still, and maybe Sue you could bring in, like the Eagles brought him in for another. I know you don't like Sue, but like he was a great player, but he's I don't know. I don't think the Chiefs are going to get rid of Jones, but like I don't know what. Yeah, maybe he's just waiting and just I'm just going to come in the day before the season starts. And
he is accumulating a lot of fines, I guess, right? So like I think he's up over $1 million now in fines.
Yeah, he's like, is it
50K per day missed of camp?
And it's not even per practice day. I guess it's every day. So it's 350,000 a week. So if it's been 3 weeks, it's over $1 million now. So
yeah.
Do you have any other insights on the Chiefs? Like they have it seems like Pacheco and Tony, the Chiefs are at least somewhat hopeful that they'll be ready by the beginning of the season. But I think on offense, you don't really worry about the personnel as much because you have Mahomes.
Yeah, as long as he's healthy, then
Mahomes can't play defense, and it seems like most of the young guys that are really good on the Chiefs defense are in the secondary and in the linebacking core, but you need somebody up front. And you have Carl Aftis maybe going to make a jump, but he's an end. You have the new first round draft pick Felix Uzama Anadike Uzama, and he's an end. in the middle, there's like Derek Nottie, who is serviceable,
Yeah.
Turk Wharton, who has been injured, maybe coming back. But like it's not a there's not a Danny Shelton, the big guy who didn't really play a whole lot last year, but maybe could stop the run. But like there's not, I don't know, there's the defensive line without Jones, like taking up like a double team every play
Every
and
single play, right?
still being kind of a monster. Like he was one of the best he could have been defensive player of the year last year. He was Aaron Donald like probably you might say. Um yeah,
But we're
there's
probably not getting any answers right away, I guess, right? We have the first preseason game this weekend.
against the New Orleans Saints. We haven't it's with Derek Carr probably as their starter, former longtime opponent.
Maybe not in this game, but
Well,
will
he
we
might play the first
will
series.
we see starters? That was gonna be my question. Will
Hmm.
we see starters in game one? Like we didn't see either Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers in the Hall of Fame game.
That's kind of a game zero
Yeah,
situation because
that's their first preseason
they
game.
have an extra preseason game. They have another week. They have three more. Like, I think every other NFL team has three games, and I think that
But does that not count as their first? Do they have an additional game?
um
I just assumed that took the place of their first game. Is it not?
the Jets still have three preseason games
Oh,
remaining.
okay.
They play the Panthers,
So
and
it's an exhibition of an exhibition.
yeah, it's game zero. Yeah,
Game zero.
yeah.
So you think we'll see at least some
I
starters.
think we'll see the starters through maybe two series or one quarter, whichever is longer, probably. And I think
Yeah.
usually the second game they play the first half, and then the third season game they're off. Or maybe they'll play one series at the most, and then you just kind of let the fringe roster guys battle it out for who's going to make the team. Is kind of how they've been doing the three preseason games. I think when they had four preseason games, normally it was a little more unpredictable what they were going to do for each game because
Yeah.
but with only three, it seems like, well, we're going to have the starters come out and just get a taste of things, maybe a quarter, and then maybe a half, and then
It
just
looks as though so the Chiefs play the Saints in New Orleans Sunday noon.
uh-huh.
New Orleans is favored by 3 over
Ooh,
under
this is
38.
this is the only
Would you be betting on this preseason game, Mike?
this is no this is the it's a fool's errand to bet preseason football. But I guess if I did bet preseason football, I would think the Saints would win, but I don't know. 3 points is a lot. I don't think like I think it's a coin flip. So if I bet on the winner, I might pick New Orleans. But if I got the 3 points and the Chiefs, I would take the Chiefs probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, the it's always a low over under because usually those backups don't have a lot of scoring potential. But maybe I don't know. I think Blaine Gabbert and Bouchel might want to shine, and maybe there's a little bit of offense. I think Nagy probably wants to air it out a little bit, being the first year
Yeah.
offensive coordinator, or at least back. I think I go with
With,
I think I go with the over.
yeah, with
Uh,
only 38, I mean, if both teams score in the 20s, you're well over the 38,
yeah,
right?
I think I go with the over on that.
Yeah.
That might be the only one that I would be comfortable with.
It
I
looks like
don't.
most of the preseason game ones. I don't see any at 40. Looks like all the over-unders are 39 or less. 39 and a half for Bucks Steelers.
That's interesting that game is higher than the others because I would say neither of those offenses are great because
But they're
neither.
not. That's not the actual offenses of
I
either
know, but like
team,
even
right?
at their best, those offenses aren't that great. But like I don't know, I think the Chiefs. Maybe
It
they
looks
think
like
the Chiefs will play
Rams
their.
Chargers is the lowest over under at 34 and a half. Would you just take the over on all of them?
Possibly.
What if, yeah, what if you said what if you said you just take the over on all of them? How do you think we'd come out?
I think we'd win more than we lost.
Yeah.
But this is also a thing where people like overs more than unders. So I
Yeah.
think traditionally it's better to pick under if you don't know what's going on because because it's more fun to be over. And
Yeah.
it's and you could say, well, it's like the old adage is it's always under until it's over. So you have to things have to break your way, and you have to actually everybody starts out under, and then it has to get over. So I I don't know what I would
The
do.
semi-coordinated effort to get over though. It
So
takes
like I guess why don't we look and see what say, well,
yeah.
we would say we each would take let's say if we took a blanket over, are all 32 teams playing? So it'd be 16 games.
Yeah.
How much would we win if we just took the over on all of them and didn't worry about um that'd be interesting just to experiment to see.
Yeah.
And we could kind of do that for each preseason game and see if do the overs or unders change. Like is game 2 higher because we think the offenses are going to
The
play more,
starters you'd think would play more, right?
but you think also the defensive starters are going to play more. So you think that would balance things out, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
So the range on over under is only 34 and a half to 39 and a half. That's the
I think that also means that Vegas has no idea what's going on, and that
and
nobody
also
has.
why would you bet on a preseason game?
You have to. Well, yeah. If you're like there, I guess it's fun to watch and do. But that's really funny.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's like some really smart gambler that says I make all of my money in the preseason because nobody knows what's going on. You can
Yeah.
still bet on them, and if you follow preseason trends, maybe there's an edge there that you can get that you wouldn't get for regular season because, well, there's more eyes on it from everybody's perspective, so it's harder to find an edge in the regular season than there is. It's like I have heard like if you know a couple of teams really well in like minor college football or college basketball, like
Oh yeah.
you could know how they like a conference better than what they do in Vegas because
The Vegas,
they
yeah,
have to
sure.
follow everybody. And if you follow the Ohio Valley Conference or something like that, and you're really smart on the Ohio Valley, you could make money on it. But the problem is that if you bet a lot of money on those games, Vegas is going to take notice and see who is betting and probably change odds or not let or something like that because they don't want to lose money on those sorts of things. You have to kind of play it cool, I guess.
Right.
But if Vegas was making money on the other people and just losing on you, I guess it wouldn't matter as much because they'd still make money. But if you're betting, if you're the only bet that's $10,000 on the Ohio Valley Conference and everybody, and like that's like 50% of the money bet, and you're winning a lot, well, that's gonna be noticed.
Yeah. Yes, there would be some kind of investigation.
Yeah, and
But
it's not.
maybe more importantly than this though, looking forward to this regular season, are we going to continue our betting competition in the same way, or do you want to change it up a little bit, or what are you thinking looking ahead?
I think our betting competition was pretty good. I like having the 3 games a week
Yeah.
because we could perhaps keep track on our own, like what we would do for every game. And are we better every game than we are like if we just kind of had to bet each way rather than thinking these are our best bets worse or better than our average? That
Yeah.
might be something to keep track of.
So like on the show, we would still do the same thing we did last year, but then off show we would keep track of each individual game,
Yeah.
and then we'd compare ourselves to our overall.
Yeah, like maybe we would have to do each individual game. We would pick spread over under for each individual game.
Okay.
And we could see how we did over under and spread. Like you wouldn't have to think about, well, if I had to flip a coin, I'd do over here, over, under, over, and
Yeah.
then which team. But then for the show, having our 3 bets, that are a combination of over unders and money line and not money line and point spread. That would be interesting, I think, because we could kind of see whether first impression without thought is better than in-depth analysis,
Yeah.
or confidence hurts us more than just snap judgment, something, or is better.
Or is it
Well,
all just random?
it was all random. Yeah, yeah,
So what you're talking about is a big spreadsheet.
yeah.
I think we can do that. That's
They can
fine.
do that.
Yeah.
They can do that. And I'm sure our legions of fans are also interested in how this.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be asking us for access to that spreadsheet. How do we see
We
this?
were really close, weren't we, on the entirety of the regular season? I think you beat me barely, or I beat you barely, and then
I think I got you by just a hair. Yeah.
a hair, and then I think you came back. I started out pretty higher, and then you
Yeah. I think I got close and then kind of took over at the end. And
and you won. I think you also won in the playoffs over me.
yeah.
So you were the champion. So we
Yeah,
won
I
the
think I
same
won the first two phases of the competition, but I don't remember what happened next. I'll have to go
Super
back
Bowl.
and like see where we are, because then we did a college basketball round.
Yeah, I won the basketball one.
Yeah, so maybe it's 2-1 right now.
Yeah,
So
we'll have to see. We'll check the archives.
yes, we'll go back.
But
Yes.
we can. That's a subject for next week. I think next week as well, to preview, we want to talk about further, like, our kind of continue our NFL preview. Maybe talk about the quarterback situations in the various teams, and also talk about the general season preview, and look at over unders. So that was another thing, over under win totals, because Las Vegas every year releases wins and losses predicted for teams, and there are 17 games this year. And so, do we think that the predictions by Vegas are too high or too low? I think both of us have opinions, especially on a few of the teams. I don't think we have really solid opinions on all of the teams. But before we started the broadcast, we looked at some of these over unders, and we were surprised about a few of them. I think both of us were very surprised that Atlanta was, I think, 8.5. They thought 8.5 wins. So that's, eight. They were an 8-9 or a 9-8 season, where I think both of us thought Atlanta was going to be terrible and much lower than that. But maybe with a bad NFC South, they could be higher.
Yeah.
And we also think we're surprised the Giants were predicted maybe only to be 8.5 or 7.5 wins, and the Jets were predicted to be 9.5 wins, higher than the Giants, even though the Giants are in a weaker conference. But the Jets, added Aaron Rodgers. But
So do we want to do these things before the preseason really gets underway, or do we want to wait till like between the third preseason game and the regular season to do these final picks?
we could do the final picks after the third preseason. I guess we could see what the injuries are like. That's probably a better thing, because I guess if somebody suffers a season-ending injury, but we could maybe do our general kind of preview of the NFC.
Yeah, NFC quarterbacks next week.
NFC quarterbacks next week, AFC quarterbacks the following week, and then the over/under predictions before the season. And then I think that sounds that would be good.
Yeah, that sounds great.
We've had if you were following us 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, we had the really, really detailed quarterback predictions, and some of those I think still stand, because a lot of those quarterbacks are still in the league. Quarterback is one of those positions that turns over, at least at the starting positions, a little bit less than some of the other positions. The quarterback longevity is a little bit higher, because you can, you'll play. You aren't washed up at age 27 or 28 like you are as a running back or a special teams player. And but we'll preview the quarterback position of the National Football Conference next year. The NFC
Next week.
Yeah, not next year. For this next coming year, but we'll do it next week, instead of I'm time traveling or something in my head, and I'm forgetting. But the NFC has, we think, worse quarterbacks on the whole than the AFC. So perhaps,
do we think this, or do we know this?
I think we know, but I think also we think. I guess you can't know it for sure,
Eh,
but they've had quarterbacks that are less successful in the past. Maybe we could say. Because in some cases, well, you might say, is I don't know, is Kirk Cousins really as that bad? Is he maybe better than Tua Tagovailoa, or is he worse? I don't know. But
but
still, I
he
think
was probably like the 7th best AFC
yeah.
quarterback.
And Kirk Cousins is probably seen as like the second best NFC
Yeah,
quarterback right now, especially with Rodgers gone. So Jalen Hurts is seen as the number one quarterback, you think? I guess in the NFC. And then
probably.
it's
Went
like
to the Super
Dak
Bowl last year.
Prescott or Kirk Cousins or Dirk Carr. Daniel Jones.
Is Brock Purdy in the top 10 of the NFC quarterbacks?
Top 10 for sure. Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
top.
see that's already, and
Yeah,
he's only
it's
had
bad.
he's
Yeah, the
only played
NFC
a
is
couple
bad.
of
I guess
games.
we can just say definitively the NFC is worse. But I think that makes for a more interesting discussion. And the NFC as well, well, they got, I guess, the number one overall pick, Bryce Young, who is a pure pocket passer in the worst way, being a passer that could fit in your pocket rather than would stay pocket. He's a
Yes.
slightly smaller version of Kyler Murray, who is a tiny version of, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes. Or I say tiny, he's probably tiny Lamar Jackson. I would say Kyler Murray, probably tiny Lamar. And yeah, Lamar, like he's like on the down, like he's had some bad years, but I think he would be the best quarterback in the NFC for sure. Hurts had one good season, but we had talked about this. I think I would rather have Lamar Jackson than Jalen Hurts back there, but Hurts, I don't know. I think that's at least debatable between those two. And right now, Jackson is maybe a top five AFC quarterback. Would you put him in the top five?
He'd be 5 or 6, I guess, right? Somewhere,
Well,
maybe
I think
maybe even 7. I don't know, because I mean, you
consensus.
think it's got to
You,
be Mahomes, Burrow, and Allen, or 2, 3. I don't, maybe
yeah,
interchangeable.
yeah.
And
And
then
then well, then you
and then
have
Aaron
Rodgers, you
Rodgers is
have
probably
Herbert,
going to
you
be,
have Trevor Lawrence, maybe
yeah. I
Tua.
don't,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. No, I don't know. That gets really tricky. Is even, would you even say? Well, I mean, if you're talking about pure quarterback
Russell Wilson, if
versus,
he has a comeback, like he might be up there. Like, yeah, it's so this is one of those things we'll talk. This is a kind of preview for next week. Who are the
yeah.
best quarterbacks? So like, I almost forgot about Wilson. Wilson was seen as an MVP caliber guy 2 years ago, and so was Lamar Jackson, and so was
Did we mention the Chargers quarterback?
yeah Herbert. I mentioned Herbert
Oh,
as
you said you did say
yeah,
Herbert. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
but like he's kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
But
Then maybe my last question for this show to you then is: will you review your own analysis from our previous quarterbacks discussion for next week? Will you use yourself as a reference from our previous episodes of this show?
like how far back will I go?
No, I
Well,
mean, will you reference yourself as an analyst when saying like this quarterback is better than this quarterback because Michael
because
Werman said he was great 2 years ago and would have been the starter and was the starter?
I don't think I will reference myself that way, but I will say I've said this for a long time and I will continue to say it. And I think my long-standing, I think I do trust some of my long-standing opinions. Like if I'll go back and think about it, well, I was like, I knew that Mac Jones sucked like a long time ago, or I
Oh, we
knew
didn't mention Mac Jones in the top
yeah,
AFC
he
quarterbacks.
might be a top five NFC quarterback, but he is definitely a top 16 AFC quarterback, I guess you could say. But although maybe you could say Bailey, I still think Bailey Zappi is just as good as Mac
So,
Jones. He just didn't go to Alabama, and he doesn't have
so maybe he would fall outside the top
the
16
draft
AFC quarterbacks.
pedigree. Yeah, you could say, well, maybe I don't know. Is Blaine Gabbert better than Mac Jones, or is one of the backup quarterback Marcus? No, Mariota went to the Eagles. I was thinking one of the backup high ranking backup quarterbacks at like maybe Will Levis and Tannehill could both be better than Mac Jones, I think, or whoever is backing up. I guess we'll have to look at the backups. We'll have to look at those for next time. I don't really remember. Tyler Huntley made the Pro Bowl, and he is Lamar Jackson's backup. So I guess you could say, well, he might be better than Michael McCorkle Jones.
So tune in next week to find out how low Mac Jones falls on Mike's
Zach Wilson, who was Zach Wilson, who was the backup to Aaron Rodgers, was drafted number 3 overall, I think, or 3 overall, 2 overall. He was drafted higher than Mac, and I think of him as potentially higher upside than.
You're gonna have to, at the end of analysis for next week, you're gonna have to. That's 2 weeks from now because that's AFC.
Yeah,
NFC next week. You have to say where Mac Jones falls on the scale
quarterback list. Yeah. He's my Jordan Love. I dislike that the Packers picked him, but as time goes on, I like Aaron Rodgers less, so I care less about angering Aaron Rodgers. And I also don't think Jordan Love has done anything really to raise my ire in any way, whereas Mac Jones has kind of been a malcontent and just a crappy player, and his backup has been as good or better than him. And so I don't care for him. And I have an irrational dislike.
I still remember from that previous analysis from a couple years ago when you made the discovery that Jordan Love was not the best player with the last name of Love from the conference that he was drafted from.
Yeah, the Fresno State Love. Was it Fresno State? Utah. Jordan Love was Utah State, I believe, and there was a guy from Fresno State, and he had a better. Was it Fresno? Maybe it was not Fresno State. I don't know who it was.
It doesn't really matter. I just remember thinking it was funny that it's like this, even with that last name, was not the best player from that conference. That's funny.
Yes. I was, but apparently Jordan Love, I don't know. I haven't heard a lot from Packers camp whether he's good or not. So it's probably saying that he's not, if you haven't heard a lot of hype from it. I don't know, but we'll see what happens. I don't think you need to be a great quarterback though in the NFC, because the NFC's best quarterback, at least over the last few years, went to the AFC, and he's now the AFC's 5th best quarterback, maybe, depending on how.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is he's getting older. He's in a new system, in a new city that's going to be a lot more negative in terms of its commentary about him. And he's a prickly, thin-skinned individual as it is, a sort of know-it-all, but
he's only going to make the league minimum this year.
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to work. And he's in a division where I think probably on paper maybe the Jets are the 3rd best team. I don't know if maybe you could say they're clearly better than the Patriots, but I don't think you could say they're clearly better than the Dolphins, even with Jalen Ramsey's injury. So, but that's a lot. We're talking about a lot about next week, and we'll get into next week and 2 weeks from now when those times come. But we should probably leave off and end today's discussion right now.
Just like that, or
are you do you concur, Dr. Scaff?
Oh yes, I believe we should. I thought that was actually the end.
No, we can't end without our signature.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, but maybe
that was ending our discussion of the week. This is simply a boilerplate formality that we add at the end of every episode. It has nothing. We for all our listeners know, we could just be adding adding it to the end from some sort of pre-recorded set of pre-recordings, but
there will be no editing, Mike.
We do recordings every week. We do very little editing here because We do not want to hide our flaws or our shortcomings because we want to be as transparent and forthright and forthcoming as possible here at the Morning Trek Power Hour. And on that note, as always, I remain Dr. Michael Werman. He remains Dr. Andrew Scaff. We remain the Morning Trek Power Hour. Please like and subscribe to our podcasts or our YouTube channel. We will be eternally grateful for your continued patronage. And until we visit one another again next week, we will bid you a good day.